and a lecturer, Vittorio Bufacchi, who is a senior lecturer in the philosophy department at the University College Cork. And he specializes in political philosophy, and especially on questions of social political philosophy, and especially on questions of social injustice, human rights, and political violence. And this has led him to Cicero and to writing a short book, as he calls it, on why Cicero matters. On why Cicero matters. And he's going to tell us all about why Cicero matters in the next 45 minutes.
Or so.
So, the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Katerina, and thank you, Helen, for organizing this, and thank you, Kani, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here, and delighted to actually show you the book, because it's not out yet. The book actually is going to be out on the 19th of October, and the launched, and it literally arrived on Thursday, and I was on the train on Friday. Sorry, it came on Wednesday, and I was on the train on Thursday. So I'm delighted to show you what it looks like, and here it is, why Cicero Matters. So this is kind of a book launch before the book. I do have a confession to make, because I've got the impression that you may actually know more about Cicero than I do, because I'm not trained as a classicist, and I'm not trained as a Latinist. So why write a book on Cicero? All my work is in contemporary political philosophy. I'm interested in questions of democracy, questions of justice, questions of human rights, and that's what I've been writing on. In fact, my last book from 2 years ago was a philosophical analysis of COVID-19. So that was, events from 2020, and now I go back a good 2,000 years, and as I say in the opening paragraph of my book, this book is about the greatest chickpea in the history of humanity. Because Cicero, which would have been Cicero at the time, comes from cicer, which is a chickpea. So it has to do with the shape of the nose. The cognomen, which is like a nickname. And yes, his nose was shaped like a chickpea, and that's how he gets his name. But why write a book on Cicero? And I actually, as someone who works in political philosophy, I actually feel very strongly that we need to go back to Cicero in particular. Now, there's always an argument for going back to the ancients and going back to ancient Rome, absolutely. But I actually think right now Cicero is truly important. Cicero is truly important. So I'm going to try to persuade you that that's the case. Now, and again, I'm going to this is background that everyone knows, but just to remind ourselves, depending, some people say it was 753 BC, some people say 754 BC, but everyone agrees that it was founded on the 21st of April. In fact, still to this day in Rome, you celebrate the birth of Rome, the 21st of April. So, right, so of course the first king of Rome was Romulus, and that's where the name comes from. And Rome had 7 kings, right? And the last king of Rome was Tarquinius Superbus in 509, and that's when the monarchy ended in 509 BC, and it relates to the rape of Lucrezia and that story that people may be familiar with, the famous paintings by Titian and many others. So something happened at this moment in time in 509 BC, where the Romans decided that they had enough of the arbitrariness and the abuse of different political system. And that's the birth of the Roman Republic. And it is a remarkable thing, the Roman Republic. Now, let's not for a moment assume that it was perfect, because it wasn't, right? So the Roman Republic, we're still talking about a society where women had very restricted rights and a very limited citizenship. And that's obviously problematic. We're talking a society where there was a great deal of poverty and inequality amongst the Roman citizens, and that's problematic. Amongst the Roman citizens, and that's problematic. And that obviously means there was also very limited social mobility, right? So sometimes when people refer to the ancient Romans and, you know, there is this idealized, it wasn't. It was a republic, right? And as a republic, it was based on a constitution. Based on a constitution means that it was based on the rule of law and not the rule of the one king. Between the monarch and the others is that everyone else is a subject to the king. In a republic, you're not a subject, you're a citizen, right? And there was elections, there was a senate, and a lot of the things that define the way that we think of democracy today goes back to the Roman Republic. All right. Of course, the Greeks also claim, rightly so, that they, in a sense, perhaps invented democracy before the Romans. I'm not, in a sense, perhaps invented democracy before the Romans. I'm not saying that this was a new invention, but the Roman Republic, this experiment in a form of democracy, lasted for much longer. It lasted for the best part of 400 years. 400 years of a Roman Republic. 400 years of a rule of law and constitutions and elections and so forth. Why is this significant? Well, it's significant because it came to an end. And it came to an end around Cicero. To an end around Cicero's time. So when did the Roman Republic actually die? So, you know, we can have a sort of a discussion about that. You could put it down to when Julius Caesar elected himself or was nominated as a dictator, because that's the Latin term that they used at the time. So the moment that someone becomes a dictator, that's the end of the republic. Dictator perpetuo was Julius Caesar's title. Or you could say it was a few years later when Octavian became the... But personally, I would actually put the date to when Cicero was murdered. Because the thing about Cicero is that he lived all his life with one goal, which was to defend the Republic. And he managed to do so for a long time, and then it ended. And he was assassinated. And the thing is, in the place that we find ourselves, in time today, there are forces that are trying to undermine our modern democracy. They are populists, they are authoritarian, exactly what you had during Cicero's time. The parallel is striking. The Roman Republic was killed off by populist authoritarian forces. And they killed off something that went on for 400 years. Our modern democracy is just barely 100 years old. And my fear is that we take our democracy for granted. That because we live in democracy, we assume that democracy will always survive. Because what else could there be? And I don't feel so reassured. And I actually think that now is the time to really rethink, we need to strengthen our democracy. And going back to Cicero, I think it's important because that's what he fought for to the best of his ability. That's what he fought for to the best of his ability. All right, so that is sort of the general thing, but it is, as far as I'm concerned, it kind of a story of two people. And you have Julius Caesar, 106 BC. They were contemporaries, right? There's only 6 years between them. But the thing is, everyone knows who Julius Caesar is. Not many people know about Cicero. Now, you guys know about Cicero, but that's because you love the classics. But when I was in a classroom at my kid's school, and of course there is the things about ancient Rome, and you have your photographs of the Colosseum, because you have to have the Colosseum, and then there's a photograph of Julius Caesar, right? And I went to the teacher and I said, Julius Caesar committed genocide. Julius Caesar committed genocide. Why is he up there? But not only there is this myth about Julius Caesar, but it's a very positive role model for many politicians over many centuries. And so I want to, and of course, is one book going to do it? No. But I want the spotlight to move from someone who did a lot to kill off the Republic and democracy, and who committed genocide into Gaul. But what happened? And the thing is, we have forgotten about Cicero, right? So when many depictions of the ideas of money, and there's a really interesting story to be told here, which perhaps some people know and others don't, right? So you have a conspiracy to get rid of the dictator, because this is the end of our republic. We have to get rid of him. The dictator, because this is the end of our republic. We have to get rid of him, and that will bring back the republic. And of course, Brutus is behind the plot, right? So the stabbing of Julius Caesar, et tu Brutus, yeah, we know all that. And then who turns to the forum, turns to the Roman people, right? He's holding up his dagger, drenched in the blood of Julius Caesar. And what does he say? Now, you can imagine what he could have said. He could have said, down with the dictator, or up the republic. This is freedom, right? He could have said all those things, which are the obvious thing to say. What Brutus said is, Cicero, Cicero. That's the first thing he said. And the thing is, no one was more surprised by this than Cicero himself, because he was kept in the dark about the plot to kill Julius Caesar. So someone says, Cicero, you realize that someone is claiming they're doing this on your behalf. But why? Because Cicero was seen as the symbol of everything that is the opposite of Julius Caesar. I mean, what a remarkable thing, right? And so, of course, why was he kept in the dark? Of course, why was he kept in the dark? And we can speculate here, right? Possibly because he was extremely squeamish. We know that he wasn't at all a typical Roman. He hated the gladiatorial games. He hated war. He was of a widow. They just didn't think he would be up to it. But never, it doesn't matter. It was done for Cicero. I mean, what a remarkable thing. So why is it that we have almost forgotten about Cicero and we do everything for Julius Caesar, right? So that's the sort of stuff, right? So that's the sort of stuff, right? And this is the first question, why is Cicero largely forgotten today? Okay. Now, who do we blame for the fact that Cicero doesn't get the attention that he deserves? First of all, I blame Shakespeare, right? So this was I don't know if people have seen it. This was a phenomenal production of Julius Caesar, but International Theatre. But Julius wrote a whole play on Julius Caesar. He didn't write a play on Cicero. Cicero makes no appearance except very briefly here as the butt of Shakespeare's joke. So for those of you who know the play, can remember who it is, who turns around and says, oh, they just killed Julius Caesar, and what did Cicero say? And the other man says, oh, yeah, he gave a speech in Greek. He's irrelevant. And that's all you get. Play, you get someone like Mark Antony, who gets the most spectacular speech by Shakespeare. Friends, Romans, citizens, lend me your ears, right? And it is beautiful, right? Now, Mark Antony, it is beautiful, right? Now, Mark Antony was everything but eloquent. I mean, he was a drunk brute. They believe, okay, so they're always discovering new things from Pompeii and Herculaneum. They've discovered a scroll in Herculaneum, which of course has been burned, but there is technology to sort of, and they believe that it's actually the one, possibly and only treatise that was written by Mark Antony, which is all on being drunk, right? Someone who, and Cicero's speeches against Mark Antony will tell you a lot more about it, right? So Shakespeare, it's Julius Caesar, it's Mark Antony, and Cicero is gone. So that's so Shakespeare. And then there's someone else that I think gets the blame as far as which is Dante, right? So now, I don't know whether Dante is part of the classics as far as you guys are concerned, but right, so what happens in Dante's Divine Comedy, right? You have the Inferno, you have the circles of the Inferno, you have the circles of the Inferno, all the way down, and down on the 33rd circle, down there is Satan, right? And it's depicted by Dante as monster chewing for eternity the three most despicable people in the history of humanity. Do you know who they are? Ha! Got you there. Right. Deserves to be down there with Satan. So you have Judas, which is predictable, right? He's the man who condemned Jesus Christ. And so, fair enough, he should be down there. But who are the other two? One of them is Gaius Cassius Longinus. And the third mouth is Marcus Brutus. Now think about it. Both these guys were involved in the stabbing of Julius Caesar. So as far as that is concerned, the murder of Julius Caesar is twice as bad as the murder of Jesus Christ. I mean, you know, and it's part of the start of the myth that you need a strong man, because there is a masculine aspect to it, in politics. And so, this is again, this is my reading of it, but it's, oh my God, what a terrible thing that they killed Jesus Christ. But it's even worse that they killed Julius Caesar. The fact that Cicero gets a really bad rep compared to Julius Caesar is immortalized in many ways by one of the greatest scholars of ancient Rome, a German scholar, Theodor Mommsen, who wrote 5 volumes on the history of Rome. He got the Nobel Prize for Literature for this work, right? And the thing about, I haven't read all 5 of them. I don't know if anyone has. But I read the bits about Cicero, and he is spectacularly rude against Cicero. And this became the authority on ancient history and ancient Rome. So this is Mom's right. Cicero, a statesman without insight, without ideas or purpose, never more than a short-sighted egotist. I mean, whoa, he calls him a coward. And then he even makes fun of his philosophy. Now, Mommsen is not a philosopher, so I don't know what gives him the right to, but he stands quite as low as that of a statesman, by nature a journalist in the worst sense of the term, abounding in words poor beyond all conceptions and ideas. I mean, this is devastating stuff for the 19th century. All against Cicero. Why? Because in Germany, the unification of Germany, we need strong leadership. We need strong politicians. We need the Julius Caesars in this world. And this has become the dominant rhetoric about ancient Rome. And Cicero wrote ancient Rome. And Cicero is increasingly forgotten. Now, in terms of modern sort of media and Hollywood and films, mass media and entertainment, who do you think, of all the people that were contemporaries of Cicero, so we're talking about that period, sort of the last 106, got most of the attention by the entertainment industry? More films were made about this person than anyone else. Have a go. Cleopatra! It starts in 1912, the first film on Cleopatra, and there's been a long list of films about Cleopatra. Right? This is the famous one, The Mill, 1934. Then you have Elizabeth Taylor in 1963. Then you have Elizabeth Taylor in 1963. And then it kind of goes down from there. Of course, you will never admit to have seen Carry On Cleo. But there was a time when this was the height of entertainment. And it got even worse. I'm not going to say anything more about entertainment. And it got even worse. I'm not going to say anything more about this one in 1970, right? And then more recently, there was another, I didn't see it actually, I don't know if any, on Netflix, there was a series on Cleopatra. You didn't see it? Yeah. Did you see it? Was it good? It's okay. It goes an African actress to play Cleopatra, and oh my God, could Cleopatra be dark-skinned? I mean, and that's what really got the attention. But so there is still this interest in Cleopatra, right? All right. So Cleopatra gets by far most of the attention, which speaks volumes for the entertainment industry in Qatar. All right. And who's next? Spartacus is up there, but he doesn't get as much attention as our Julius, right? And again, you have films, you have Marlon Brando. If Marlon Brando plays Julius Caesar, has anyone seen it? No. Sorry? Years and years ago. Was it good? Yeah. So 1953, and then in 1970, there you have a more recent one. So again, and even just looking at the picture, you get the idea that, wow, what a beautiful, strong, great person. All these films are about how wonderful Julius Caesar is, right? So you have Cleopatra, you have Julius Caesar is, right? So you have Cleopatra, you have Julius Caesar, and you have your Spartacus. Of course, you have your Spartacus, and rightly so, right? Where is Cicero in all this? Does Cicero appear in any one of those films that I mentioned before about Cleopatra? Is a soft porno film, and actually there is a walk-in part by Cicero, which is best forgotten for, as I'm told, obviously, I have no idea. There is, but where else does Cicero appear? Now, there is, and you probably have seen this, because this is the HBO, BBC series on Rome, yeah? Yeah.
He has a pretty substantial part in that.
He does have a substantial part in that.
I can't remember his name, the same actor who played Mr. Collins.
Exactly.
Precious.
That's it. It's David Bamber. It's David Bamber. But that's the thing. For those of us who watched Pride and Prejudice, and it's still the best of all the things are said, right? But how can you take Cicero seriously when he comes on the scene? And I just, every time I try to see that scene, I'm thinking of Mr. Collins, which is a great actor.
He then plays Prince Philip.
Yes,
In The Crown.
he does.
It's the same, like 12 actors. They just cycle.
It is the same answer, but I mean, Mr. Collins. Does everyone know what we're talking about in terms of Pride and Prejudice? Oh, you have to see it. Oh, you have to see Pride and Prejudice. This is the BBC Pride and Prejudice. So, yes, there are, that's the best attempt to get Cicero some. So, it's kind of interesting because actually the entertainment industry shapes the way that we think in terms of who's significant, who's less significant, and Cicero is, again, forgotten, right? Now, what happens in the 21st century? Now, what happens in the 21st century? There is, thankfully, a bit of a revival of interest in Cicero. And I hope that people here have read the volumes by Rob. You have? Yeah. It's fantastic. Right. So this is a trilogy. I think the first volume was 2002. And this is a trilogy on the life of Cicero. And Robert Harris, who's a very, very, very good author, he gave a number of interviews where he says, I've actually read everything that he wrote. Now, we have more from Cicero than anyone else in that period of time. We have his philosophical works, we have his speeches, and remarkably, 2,000 years hence, we have 2,000 of his personal letters. And so much of what we know that went on in that period is because of it. Obviously, they're written on papyrus that did not last, but over the centuries, you had monks in monasteries copying every single word that Cicero said, because that time, and because of his Latin and because of his work on rhetoric, you have Robert Harris who reads all this stuff and says, look, I'm going to give you a biography of Cicero. And everything that I say is historically accurate, except where we obviously have gaps. And wherever there are gaps, I make it up. So, and wherever there are gaps, I make it up. So, it's a novel. But I think it's a fantastic work he did. I'm biased, but I actually think, whoa. And there was also a West End theater production based on it, which was pretty good. Now, Cicero, in fairness, is the topic of many books, recent books. These are all books in the last sort of 20 years. Gesine Manuwold, who's the head of the department of classics at UCL. You have Catherine Tempest. But the thing is, all these books are by very outstanding scholars in classics. And the problem with the modern universities is that, and I hope I'm not going to offend anyone, that university administrations, when they have to make cuts, the first thing they do is they close either the classics department or they close the philosophy department. And so, you know, the idea of a university without classics, and I hardly have to tell you that, right? But the problem is that the classicists talk to themselves, but this work doesn't get out of classics departments. And so this is, in a sense, this is why I wrote the book, because I'm not a classicist, I'm not a Latinist. I'm interested in democracy, and I want the people in political science departments, people in philosophy departments, to know about Cicero. So I wrote the book, you know, having read all the stuff, and almost translating it for non-experts. And that's non-experts. And that's, you know, and my argument is, guys, Cicero matters. Really matters because our democracy matters and we have to defend our democracy. And I know you're not going to read these people, so let me tell you why, what he says and why he says it, right? So that's where it comes to. So, what he says and why he says it, right? So that's where it comes to. So, just to wrap things up, because I went on for longer than I thought I would, and I apologize. Let me give you two quick reasons why Cicero still matters, right? First of all, is, as I was saying before, the resurgence of the populist far right. What's going on here? Catiline, right? There he is. This is a painting in Palazzo Madama, which is the Senate, the House of the Senate in Rome, so making a speech against Catiline. And of course, Catiline was one of those populists, authoritarians, who tried to orchestrate a coup d'etat against the Roman Republic when Cicero was the consul. And Roman Republic when Cicero was the consul. And so, interestingly, you know, again, you know, those things, you know, democracies are a threat. And this is where Cicero gave his very famous speech, which in the past, anyone who studied Latin would have learned this. But, and this is the thing why I find Cicero so remarkable. Right? That was Cicero's speech against Catilina. In the name of heaven, Catilina, how long do you propose in? In the name of heaven, Catilina, how long do you propose in? Quasque tandem abutere patienza nostra. And look at this, right? This is a demonstration in Hungary in 2012. This is when I think it was Orban, but there was an attempt to change the constitution in such a way that it would make it less democratic. And you have street demonstration, and you have an old man with a sign, Quos Quotandem. I mean, how remarkable is that? You know, you go to a street protest with a Latin sign. But that's Cicero. This is our undermining our democracy. No, how dare you? I mean, I just think it's remarkable. Right. So there was a whole string of people who tried and failed, because Cicero managed to hold them off from undermining the Republic. Catiline, Claudius Pulcher, and of course Julius Caesar, who was successful, and then he was killed. But the thing is, what do these modern-day populists? Any populist claims to be for the masses against the elite, but those people, the Catiline, the Claudius, the Julius Caesars, they were talking populism, but they came from very wealthy, established families. So populism is an interesting thing because it has the appearance of this is the masses against the elite. It's actually a movement which is top down. Populists are often, of those populist movements, are often that elite itself. So, you know, Donald Trump can put on a red baseball cap and start talking about, you know, in a rude, popular way, but he's no working class person, obviously, right? But that's populism for you. And I think it's so interesting that the kind of populists that we have today are so similar to the populists that were starting to undermine the Republic. So there are lessons there, and I think there are important lessons that we have to learn and remember. And what Cicero argued, and I think the lesson is still important, and I think if we don't learn that lesson, it's to our detriment. We have community, because the populists are undermining that. And also, he was aware that great inequalities feed populists. And I think those two lessons are still valid today. We live in a society where those that have and those that have not that gap is getting bigger and bigger. And so as we create that inequality, we are opening the door to populism. And so, and this is the sort of stuff that Cicero was saying, and I think it's still relevant. And so, then the other point is putting an emphasis on our duties as citizens. His greatest work, as far as I'm concerned, was De Officiis, which it translates as on duties, sometimes obligation. And Cicero says, you know, that we have a moral and political duty to seek out the truth and to preserve and uphold the structures of justice. And of course, you know, living at a time when fake news and post-truth is everywhere, the fact that we have a duty. The interesting thing is that those who are trying to undermine our democracies are doing it appealing to our rights. It's always a talk about my rights. And Cicero is important because, you know, you have rights. Citizens have rights. You also have duties. Citizens have rights. You also have duties. And we always forget our duties and we only remember our rights. And so a duty to the common good, a duty to the Republic, a duty to democracy, and to uphold the structures of justice. I mean, a date where democracy was really shaken at the foundations. So where are we now? We are at a place where things could go badly wrong. We need a role model, and we need a role model that is the antithesis of the Julius Caesar model. And I think that we could do a lot worse than to go back to Cicero. So there you have it. Thank you very much. Apologies for going